Hello and welcome, y'all. It is Writing in Series on Sudowrite. Today, Thursday, September 11th, 2025. I am your host for today's session. I'm Michael. I lead the community over at Sudowrite. I'm delighted to have you here with me today. And this is a session I love that I actually have not taught in many months. So I'm excited to revisit it. We have some new features on Sudowrite since we last taught this, so it felt like time for a refresher. I asked before we kick things off a little calibration question. It seems like most folks are semi-familiar with Sudowrite, but maybe have not experimented with the series functionality of Sudowrite yet. And so that's what we're going to be focused on today. Today's session is considered a quick start session. And so what that means, you may see on our events calendar, either quick starts or deep dives. Quick starts, try not to assume too much about your familiarity with Sudowrite. It is possible we'll have somebody on the call today for whom this is their very first session. And so we try and be accommodating in these sessions. If you hear me spell something out in great detail that you already know, I just want you to know we're trying to be accommodating for folks that do not have a ton of experience with Sudowrite so far. If you're trying to get really in the weeds and you're a Sudowrite pro, we have deep dive sessions as well, where we assume a lot more about what you already know. And those are all available on our events calendar, which you can find under the little question mark in the upper right of Sudowrite. Okay, so speaking of, this is Sudowrite. We're really starting from zero today because there's a couple of important foundations to appreciate in order to really understand what the series functionality is, how it works. So Sudowrite is a writing partner. The way it is set up is to accelerate your workflow, make things easier, allow you to spend your time and energy as an author on the parts of that creative process that you love, and less on the sort of tedium, less on the orchestration. Series is a really great example of that. So it is possible that you will use Sudowrite and you will generate a chapter of prose for a novel that you're working on. It is also possible that your workflow might be using Sudowrite and you will never generate a single word used in your book, and that instead you'll tap into some of the other capabilities, and series is accommodating either way, regardless of the way that you plan on working, regardless of the help that you want from the AI. Series is agnostic in the way that it works. So we're going to look at that today. Now, I have a couple of example projects we will look at, but to set the table for this, earlier this summer, I was out at the self-publishing show live in London. And that was my first time. I'd been in London just for layovers. I'd never really been there. And so I took this opportunity in London to go to 221 Baker Street, which that's Sherlock Holmes. That's where he lives. Unfortunately, he was not home when I visited, so I had to leave a Sudowrite card. So today we will look at a couple of Sherlock Holmes stories. And I feel like we will also look at an original work, time permitting, but it's helpful, not that those aren't original, but they're in the public domain. And the reason we're going to do that is because you have a sense of the characters. It might be a little bit easier to understand some of these mechanics looking at a project that is somewhat familiar to you, that there's at least a universal understanding that this guy's a detective. Okay, so with that, let me switch my screen over to Sudowrite. Okay. So I'm looking at Sudowrite right now, and the very first thing that I want to do is I just want to differentiate a couple of things. Because if you're brand new to Sudowrite, you have a tutorial project and a blank project on your homepage. And so just to walk through this workflow, I'm going to go into the upper left, I'm going to click on New, and I'm going to click New Project, just so we can all look at what a blank project looks like on Sudowrite. A blank project is brand new, it is empty, it does not have a title for the project. A project may have many documents, but you start with a singular document, which is also untitled. And so this is the state of a blank project. Because this is a little bit overwhelming, there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of panels and tiles. Instead, for context, I'm going to click back in the upper left, and we're going to start in the tutorial project because there's stuff already here. We can see the difference between an empty project and a project that somebody has been working in. We're midstream here in the tutorial project. So I have documents and folders for sort of management inside of this project. I can rearrange these, all the sort of stuff you'd expect. Now, The main thing we're going to be looking at today, there's a feature of Sudowrite that is somewhat its killer app, which is this in the lower left. We have something called the Story Bible. Let me know in the chat how familiar. You can give me a 1 out of 5, 1 being I've never used Story Bible, 5 being like I got this. Let me know where everybody is with Story Bible just so I can get a quick temperature check. A couple brand new. Okay, because this is a quick start, we're gonna retread some ground for the folks that are brand new. Because Story Bible can do it has two jobs primarily. The first job is that Story Bible is a source of truth. It is a way for you, the author, to keep yourself on track. If there's a character that you know is going to be your protagonist, you can pop into the characters section and you can click add character and you can make that character there. Meanwhile, if there's a character you want, you could do the same thing. You could click generate and generate a character there. The idea is we're beginning to build essentially a story Bible, right? This sort of reference for ourselves. And the reason it's so valuable and the reason we do it here in Sudowrite is because that way the AI can see it too. So just to illustrate a point, let me find a character inside of here, dialogue style. Okay, so Felix has a dialogue style here, speaks with an easy confidence, often peppering his speech with humor and wit. He has a heavy Scottish brogue, if I can spell this. So he has a heavy Scottish brogue. So there, I've just updated the dialogue style for this character named Felix. And the reason I wanted to showcase that is because later, when it comes time, there's a couple of things that we can do. First of all, I can start. So you'll see in the right panel here, I have chat. I can say, remind me how I described Felix's dialogue style. Or let's use different language so we're not so on the nose. Felix's manner of speaking. And chat is looking at Story Bible. There you go. Felix speaks with an easy confidence. He has a heavy Scottish brogue, which adds to his charm. Little editorialization from chat there. Those can be very My grandfather was off the boat Scottish, so those can be hard to parse. So we see instantly we get this sense of, oh, we're building this Bible of information that is like the absolute truth that the AI is going to see and the AI is going to know. And so chat is not just there for us to check ourselves. We could ask, like, how tall did I say Cavendish was? Like, should he be able to see over this hedge, for example? It's valuable for that. But the other thing is if we do tap into these generative elements, if I wanted to do guided write, for example, and I put my cursor down here and I said, let's see, Felix walks in and starts talking to Cavendish about beans, and I click go, what's going to happen is a write card appears in the right over here. We're going to see, you hear about the beans. Okay, he didn't, maybe we would have to get too in detail. The intent of this is very much that by articulating a dialogue style here in our characters, we're building this canonical manner of speech, right? And so you can extrapolate that to think about all of these different traits that each character has. Now, the reason I wanted to emphasize this is because by building a story Bible, we're putting a foundation in place to generate our story. But what's great is when you're working in series, you're doing that, and then you have that going into your sequel. And so in the past, prior to when we launched this feature, you'd done all this work and it was all stuck in this project. And so the intent of the series feature on Sudowrite, which I'm going to now back out and we're going to start to look at that, is that it helps you get started on other books in the same world, in the same timeline, in the same series quicker, and helps you get further through that. So just to get straight into the demo portion of series, sorry, Stephanie, please do call out if there's any big questions I should stop for, all right?
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, so you can see something here. First of all, I have a couple of Sherlock Holmes books. Here, I have A Study in Scarlet. I'm sorry, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's books. Sherlock Holmes is the character. A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of the Four. So these are the first two books in the Sherlock Holmes series. Now, how did these get into Sudowrite? There's a feature in the upper left called Import Novel. So when you click on Import Novel, you get this modal that allows you to select a file. I took the public domain Project Gutenberg books and I just uploaded those, right? So when you import a novel on Sudowrite, as long as you're using this homepage version of the button, the way that comes in, it's going to look like this. It's going to look like a Sudowrite project, work in progress. We do chapter splitting, meaning it reads the manuscript. The AI is going to split the chapters into separate documents here on the left. And it reads, it pores over the book, and it fills in the story Bible for you. So here you can see, if I scroll down, we got a detailed synopsis of this installment that we uploaded. So I didn't write this. This was the AI reading during the import, that manuscript. We also have all of these characters that were detected and created. So if I click the down arrow here, you will see we have personality for Sherlock, brilliant but socially detached. Holmes combines razor-sharp analytical abilities with an almost obsessive dedication to logic. We have his background, his physical description, his dialogue style, and because I forgot to disable my custom trait, we also get his Enneagram type, which is the investigator, naturally. How did I get a custom trait while importing work? In the header section of any story Bible section? So characters has this customize button. World building has this as well, where you can add traits that you just want as default on characters that are generated or created. So that is in there. The other thing that I would say is worth exploring, and if we have time, we'll circle back to this. Pretty much every section has some little more menu. There's a lot. Sudowrite in general has a lot of these little 3-dot menus, and you can always click on those to explore because they often hide features or functionality that you're looking for. So as you poke through, if we scroll down to world building, for example, we have another little 3-dot menu with an import and an export option hidden beneath it. And we also have customize, which for world building, you can actually customize on a per world building element. So this is something we talked about characters a little bit. We didn't really talk about world building. World building is everything else. So it's your world building elements. And so this was tough for us to articulate because it can be anything. It can be political systems. It can be like important moments in history in your world. It can be whatever is important to the story that you're telling that doesn't fit in the box of being a character. So for example, I've added custom for pets because I find that, oh, sometimes a pet or a familiar is like an important thing, and that's going to have a different set of custom traits than something like a setting. So just to dig in here, you can see these are set here on the right. And if I expand one of these, I'm going to open London, England. Naturally, the first thing that was detected on the read through. So we get other names, we get a sensory description, and we get a location. And again, these are all populated based on what Sudowrite saw during that import process. So Sudowrite read that book, said, boy, sure seems like London, England is really important to the story that you're telling here. I'm going to create a world building element that is a setting for this, and I'm going to fill in these elements. Let's see. So here we have a key event, which is the murders of Enoch Drebber and Joseph Stangerson. So if I expand this, I can see what a key event includes. So we have when it happened, we have what precisely happened, and the implications of this. And again, this is a case where the AI did that initial read through and import, and it set everything up. And what's great is it now has that foundation where whether you need to chat, so it works for, I should say as well, works for completed manuscripts, works for a work in progress, works for a messy pile of notes. The difference is that the AI, depending on how much you feed into it, the AI is going to try and fill in some blanks and weave a cohesive narrative. So if you give it nothing to go on, it's likely going to be more generative. Whereas if you give it a completed manuscript, the AI is smart enough to say, oh, this book has a dedication page. This is done. Let me see. I see some questions coming through. Yeah. Oh, so this was actually a great question. I don't know if this is a digression, so apologies. But we did have this question in the Discord right before the call, which was someone asking, is there So when you are going through the Story Bible in a blank project, you can use Story Bible in a sequential generative way, right? Where you're adding a brain dump, you're saying, here's the idea I have for a story. And then you move on to the next step, and you can work with the AI to expand and dial it in. You edit it, you ask the AI to generate, and you step through from the brain dump down each of these steps where you're generating a synopsis, generating characters. What's neat is once you have a synopsis in place, you can click generate cast, and the AI is going to throw all your characters in there. Based on the read through of the synopsis, it's going to create all of those. The equivalent is not there for world building. It's great if you're importing from somewhere else because it'll create all those world building elements at once. But if you're going through it in a generative way, it's not quite there. And so there are ways to get creative with that. You could take a synopsis and copy it into chat, and you could say, read this synopsis and create a detailed list of world building elements I should document and add to my story Bible. That may include settings, key events, etc. Now, we're only working from the synopsis because the idea is in this pretend world, we don't have a complete manuscript. You could do this same process with a complete manuscript, but here we've pasted that in. We've said, hey, okay, so here you go. It comes up with the settings, comes up with 221 Baker Street. It comes up with London, England, the American frontier. It identified a lot of the things that we got during the import. And so what's cool, wow, it's still working. Mamma mia. Now, by what we can do is we can grab. I think I can just click this copy button to make it easy. So I click that little copy button there. I can go into world building and I can click the little three dots and I can click import and I can just paste it in there. And when I click import, let's see if it's, I think I might double import. I might mess up my, oh no, here, good. I was hoping this was the case. So we have a pre-import proof, a check. So I just asked chat, hey, read my synopsis, come up with things that you think might be important. It gave me that list. I fed that list into import, and here it's saying it identified all these world building elements and it can create world building elements for these. Now, in this case, I would get rid of, I don't want characters because I have a separate character section. I would hit the little X to get rid of these characters, but I would keep the groups. I would keep the key events that it mentioned, the locations, and my list would look something like this, and I would click go. We don't have to do all of this today, right? Because we went through the complete novel import, and that import happened as a step of that process. So now we have seen, let me just check one thing. Okay, I'm going to collapse Sherlock Holmes. We have seen characters, we've seen world building, and the end goal, if you were stepping through Story Bible in a sequential way, in a generative way, going from the brain dump, the goal would be to get to this point, whether you write this or whether you have the AI generate this, the goal is to get to this place of having a comprehensive outline for your whole story. Now, during the import, we reverse engineer that, right? During the import, we read the story and we created this outline. So the use case here for novel import is maybe you already have a book and you're trying to write the sequel. And so you import, as we have done with the study in Scarlet, you get all of these documents, you get your chapter. Now, how does the outline work? If I go to chapter 1 in the left here, this is the first chapter in the book. And if I click the little, again, hidden menus, click the little three dots, we get a chapter linking panel that opens up. And so this is just building the mental link for the AI, right? The AI says, I saw chapter 1 and I created chapter 1, the prose for chapter 1, and here is the outline chapter summary in the Story Bible. And so these are two different units that we're working with. In the Story Bible, we have that chapter summary, and then in the document in the left bar, we have the actual prose. And so if you were going through this in a generative sense, say we wanted to write an addendum following the conclusion, in the outline itself, you would probably go to the very end and you would say, actually, one more thing. I'm going to do chat. So what is that? What are my Roman numerals? I'm going to call that chapter 8, right? Chapter 8. One more thing. I know that's wrong detective, but there we go. And I would say something. I am sorry, I'm not feeling inspired about how to add to something. From this, you would create that chapter and a new chapter would appear here. And you see it appears in the bottom and that is considered a linked chapter. So we have a document that was linked automatically. We created it from the outline and you have your options. Your options are open to you. You could generate long form using the draft tool, or you could generate using the write button. Yes, Stephanie.
So, Michael, there are two questions that I do want to ask because we're in this section right now. One is in reference to the story Bible cards. I know
Mm-hmm.
that there was mention of population from Excel. And
Yes.
so I'm thinking the way the question is worded, is there, are there any plans to maybe offer other ways to populate it,
So
as
I
far as like in
think,
a text
yeah,
document?
it's a good question. So Import Novel does not support Excel documents, but I believe at least characters does support. So if you are in your story Bible and you go to this specific characters import, you should see, yeah, CSV. So you can export a comma separate, I don't remember what that stands for, CSV from Excel, and then comma separated values. That's what it stands for. And then upload that here. So you can do characters. I think you can with world building elements as well. And just to clarify, yes, you can with either characters or world building. You can use CSV, which comes out of Excel. Now, you can also grab a template. I should say as well, if you do what I did and you copy out of your chat this sort of lo-fi single line description into here and you just paste it into here, or if you upload a text file that is approximately the same fidelity and you import, you're not giving Sudowrite structured data, right? You're giving Sudowrite sort of a list, a wall of text. And so the AI is going to get involved and the AI is going to create good looking world building or character cards from what you give it. If you give it a comma separated values file where you've done all that pre-work of lining everything up, it sees structured data and the AI is not going to get involved. If you want, you can get a template. If you want to bring in 100 characters that you already know are important to your series and you don't want the AI getting its grubby hands on that, download this template, make sure that those are in the format of this template, and then you can bring it in without the AI doing that. Okay, we're halfway in and we haven't even created a series folder. So let's do that right now. We have looked at the project. We now understand approximately what the Story Bible is and the value of the Story Bible. We also know that importing a novel is a shortcut to filling in that Story Bible. I should say these workflows all work whether you import to auto create a Story Bible, whether you go through a brand new blank project and a blank story Bible and generate these fields yourself, the sort of filling it in with help from the AI, or if you just fill this in manually. Everything is the sort of process wise, everything's going to work the same regardless of how you approach that. Now, the next step, I'm going to delete my blank project so we can focus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the upper left. I'm going to create a series folder. So it looks just like a regular folder. And actually, maybe we should talk about what a regular folder is. Here's a regular folder on Sudowrite. It looks like a folder and it works like a folder. It is primarily for organizational purposes. You can create them for whatever you want. You can click into them and see the projects that you have inside of there. If I go back home, what's really neat is you can hop directly into a project. You can thumb through the projects you have in there and you don't even have to click into the folder to get to one of these. If you click directly on the project, you're put into that project. Series folders work identically. They look the same, but they can do extra stuff. And so that is why they're separate here because there are different use cases. If you just want organization, go with folder. If you want the added functionality that a series folder affords, and that's what we're going to look at now, you can create a series folder. Okay, so I have a series folder. If I click into it, it's empty right now. You'll notice one difference is I do see a series timeline, but there's no projects. So let's start to put projects into here. I'm going to click home. I'm just going to click and drag a study in Scarlet in there, and I have a study in Scarlet in my series folder. If I click back in, everything should look identical with one exception. Let me get rid of my bonus chapter. I don't need that. If I go down to Story Bible now, you'll see a little line has appeared. This line is denoting what is Story Bible, as in what is specific to the story that I'm telling right now, and what is Series Bible, what is going to be shared with other projects that appear in this same folder. So I have characters, I have world building, and I have outlines that appear here. If I click into one of these and I go back to where we just were, the other slight visual difference that we should see if I expand Sherlock Holmes and I go down, you'll notice what appeared is now I get a little indication in the lower right of the character card which project this Sherlock Holmes came from. Because we'll see shortly when we begin to use series and we combine projects, we may wind up with multiple instances of characters with good reason. We'll talk about that in a second. But at first glance, everything is very similar. My same chat is there. My story Bible looks pretty similar with the exception of this line and this designation of what is story specific and what is universal to the series. So let's go back. You'll also notice Study in Scarlet appeared on the series timeline here. It's the only book. I don't have another book in the series yet. So let's add one. I go back. I grab the sign of the 4 and I drag it in. So the sign of the 4 is the second installment in the Sherlock Holmes series. Let's pop it open. I'm going to go inside here and okay, let's go down to our story Bible. Now we do have a synopsis that is again specific to this book, this installment. But if I go down to characters now, ooh, what is this? Suddenly we have multiple of Sherlock and Dr. John Watson. Meanwhile, the rest of the character list, which because the way this book has primarily different casts, right? Dr. John Watson, Sherlock Holmes, they appear in every installment, but the casts otherwise range. And so what happened is our characters from both stories became merged into this sort of complete series character list. And so if we expand Jonathan Small and we go and we see which book he came from, the Sign of the 4. Meanwhile, is it Mordecai? If we expand no, Inspector Lestrade, they're all the first. If we expand Enoch, A Study in Scarlet in the lower right. So you can tell which character came from which, that's designated there. You may notice I'm using these little carets to hide, to collapse and to show these characters. That's just for organizational purposes. I can also click and drag to rearrange if I want. Now, the big question is probably with characters where we have duplicates, right? Because we have Sherlock Holmes, brilliant but deeply flawed, from the Sign of the 4, and then we have Sherlock Holmes, brilliant but socially detached, from A Study in Scarlet. Now, the thing that we know for sure, and actually we can back out to verify this, I'm going to go back. A Study in Scarlet was, and you can change this, but A Study in Scarlet is the first book in this series. The Sign of the 4 is the sequel. And so what that means in theory, if you are working in series, is that you would be creating the next thing that you would do once you have 2 complete books, is you're probably going to write the third one. And so what that means is I would create a new project inside of this folder. And when I do, what's really neat is here, we're in a blank project just like we saw before. However, we have access to this series Bible. So if I go down to characters, I have my whole characters list. I have all of these characters. I have all of these world building elements. All of these are elements that the AI is aware of, and they're already there and they're ready for me to start the process of writing this next book in the series. So the question, and this is the question, and Sudowrite is, we don't have a strong opinion. We want to accommodate lots of different workflows and preferences. And so there are ways to manage this because right now, if I said, ooh, let's do this. Add a trait, hat, red hat. And then we go this. And we say add a trait, hat, blue hat. Just as an example. Suddenly, we've created a problem. we've created a conflict, a canonical conflict. We have red hat Sherlock and blue hat Sherlock. And so if I ask chat, what color hat did I say Sherlock wore? I don't know what we're going to get because you mentioned that Sherlock Holmes wears a red hat, which means chat reviewed the character list. It saw the very first Sherlock and it saw red hat Sherlock. The thing is, we've imported two different versions of Sherlock. The red hat, let's see, the blue hat version, which came from the first book in the series. And then at some point, he bought a red hat instead. And so the way that I would solve this is I would essentially indicate to the AI which one is truthful. So in this case, let's hide red hat Sherlock. I'm going to use this little strike through here. I'm going to say, I'm actually going to create a new chat because here's the other thing to be aware of is chat sees its own history and it can confuse itself. So I'm using the little plus sign in the upper right to create a fresh chat so it's not biased by its own answer. And I can say, what color hat did I say Sherlock wears? And in this case, the only Sherlock that the AI could see was blue hat Sherlock. So this is a very elementary demonstration, very basic demo. But the idea is that you have the option to actively manage what is exposed to the AI. And you can do this with characters and you can do this with world building. And this is one strategy for managing this idea of, hey, I've imported 3 books in my series and I want to write the 4th book. However, there's 4 versions of my characters. Which one should I use? One approach is simply hiding the 3 that are not the most recent. Theoretically, you would want to use the most recent. So actually, in our case, A Study in Scarlet's the first book, we would probably hide, I can't remember his hat color. We'd hide the older version of Sherlock. We would keep the newer Sherlock from the more recent installment in our series exposed. So here, I would leave this Sherlock exposed. Now, before I move on, Stephanie, I see your hand. I want to answer that question.
Yes, there's a story Bible question for
Mhm.
projects. So I know that if you remove the document, that the story Bible information will remain. Is it still the same if you actually remove that project from the series that the story Bible information
Hmm.
would stay?
That is a great question. And we can actually demo that because right now we're in project 2. And this is a new project that we created here. And so I'm going to create Sherlock, we'll just call it Sherlock 3. And in Sherlock 3, he meets a new character. I'm just going to manually create this rather than have the AI do it, named Frankie Smalls. Mean. Okay, so Frankie Smalls is the new character that we've added. If I collapse this, you see I manually did it. I didn't ask the AI, and I go back to a different project. I can pop into any of these other projects, and I can see under the character section, I see Frankie Smalls. So you create it in one project, instantly visible in the others. Now, we will delete. Let's delete Sherlock 3. We don't feel good about that direction that we were taking it. And we go into the first book in our series, A Study in Scarlet, and we scroll down to our character section. And who do we see at the bottom? Frankie Smalls. Frankie stuck around. And this is true whether we delete the project or whether we move a project from this folder out back to the home. So a good way to think about this is like inside of a series folder, you have a persistent series Bible. And any changes you make to the series Bible portion of your story Bible in any project inside there will be instantly apparent to other projects in there. One thing that means, and one thing I would like a flag on the play, is that it can be difficult to write multiple books in a series folder at once. Series folders makes a sort of fundamental assumption that you're going to be writing somewhat sequentially so that you can have a canonical order and so that you can make changes to a character's description as necessary. So if I was, and let me go back to assign in the for, so this is, I'm going to go back down to characters and I'm going to see the Sherlock that I left visible to myself is from this book. Sign of the 4 Sherlock is the most current, most recent Sherlock. If I didn't want to deal with the complexity of multiple, essentially what we have is we have a character version history. That is one way to think about this. We have the version of Sherlock from our first book. If I didn't want to deal with that, if I did not want to actively manage that, I would just delete the duplicates. I would establish one canonical Sherlock Holmes card. And we can do that. We can click here. Let me do it with Watson since he's so sign up for is the more current Watson. So that's probably the one we want going into the next installment that we're working on. And so I would simply look and confirm this is the Watson from A Study in Scarlet. He has grown, he's learned, we're going to delete that Watson. And now we have a singular canonical Watson. We can make changes. This is something to be aware of. Whether you're working in a single project or in a series, you can make changes to their character cards and any of these traits at any time. And in fact, even if you get rid of multiple characters, there may be traits. For example, if you were writing a Sherlock with a murderer, that murderer may have a custom trait called motive on it. However, you might not want the AI to know about the motive while you're writing earlier chapters. You would probably hide the motive from the AI until you're ready to begin telling that portion of the story. You can expose it at that point. So there's a world of possibilities in terms of how you choose to manage this, whether you like just hiding the ones you're not using. And that way, if you ever decide to do a sort of like parallel, a branching Sherlock tale, you still have the time-stamped version from the where Sherlock was in an earlier installment, or you can simply create one canonical character card and work from that. Let's see, I'm going to take a beat. Yeah, that's a good question. So is the AI not intelligent enough to understand in the second book that he purchased a new hat? And that's a good question because it gets at something which is what is the point of the series timeline, right? And the series timeline is telling Sudowrite at certain junctures, it's telling the AI, hey, just so you know, I'm going to create a new one. I had a good title for this. What was it? We're going to write the third Sherlock Holmes. Forget Hound of the Baskervilles. I could do better than that. So I'm going to call this the quantum fog event, right? And so we're actually going to write the third Sherlock here. Sherlock in Space might be a catchier title, but that's what they'll call the film. We're calling the book the Quantum Fog Event. And we're going to jump down. We're going to see we have all of our characters. We have all of our world building. What we don't have really is we don't have world building for this story yet. And so maybe the way that we can go about getting it is that workflow that we used earlier, where we pasted a synopsis into our chat and asked for it, and then we will import the sort of new world building elements. But in order to do that, we need a synopsis, and we don't actually know what the quantum fog event is yet. So let's jot some ideas into the brain. We're going to say, Sherlock, in the course of actually, let me see if I don't know if this will work while I'm on a Zoom call. Dang, my dictation isn't going to work. Okay. So in that case, in the course of an investigation, Sherlock Holmes uncovers a mysterious technology that transports him to a foreign world. And then parenthetically, he's in space. On this planet, Sherlock has to investigate a series of murders that are occurring. And then because this is the brain dump, I'm just going to conjecture here. Let's see. I think these murders are actually, let me indicate to the AI, actually happening on a different planet, but there is some quantum lock state thingy where they're occurring on this planet simultaneously, something like that. That's what I'm going to say. Genre, we're going to say classic detective. So genre, if you're going through sort of story Bible in a generative way, you don't just want to say like mystery. You're going to get really tropey, really on the nose stuff. It's better to unpack thematically what you're looking for. Classic detective meets classic detective murder mystery. Mystery meets high concept space thriller, something like that. I'm going to go to featured styles. Now, this is interesting because if you wanted to be consistent, so what's the difference between genre and style? Genre, we're talking about thematic elements we're looking for. Style, we're talking about construction of the prose, more or less. You still get some vibes from style, but we're looking for construction of the prose. I could click match my style and I could analyze some prose from one of the, actually, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll analyze some prose from one of the books that we already imported. So I'm just going to take a snippet of this. Let me grab a few thousand words. So I'm going to just paste in, I think that's, too many words. There we go. I'm going to click next. Probably not the most representative sample. Now, I will say something that we're looking at right now. I don't know if anybody has experimented with the My Voice feature that is currently in beta. You'll see that in the lower left. Something that we are considering is taking that import and giving you the option at the time of import and giving you the option to train a My Voice. And what this would do is really let you dial in the style and make sure that whatever book you're importing, there's a high likelihood you would want to write the next book in that series in that style. Maybe you should have a voice that is specifically pre-configured in that style. So that's what we're looking at. Currently, My Voice is a rewrite functionality, but in the future, we will have a sort of generative feature for that as well, where it's able to just write and sound like the work that you trained on. Let's see. I'm going to click next, and that detailed style analysis gets compressed down into something that will actually fit in our style box, reflective and somber. The narrative blends formal and colloquial, varied sentence structure, vivid imagery. Okay, that's all good. Click insert, and there we go. We have our style. And then finally, we have provided the 3 required human elements, semi-human. I leaned on the AI for style, but brain dump, genre, and style, that's the ingredients that we provide. The next step is clicking generate synopsis. And so here we're generating the synopsis. The AI is reading everything we've provided and creating this. While investigating a string of bizarre murders in London, Sherlock stumbles upon a mysterious device that transports him to a foreign world surrounded by strange technology and alien landscapes. He discovers he's on an advanced planet where a series of murders are transpiring. Okay, normally what I would do is I would take a great deal of time here to punch this synopsis up, make sure it reflects my precise vision for the story that I'm trying to tell. I could use the AI. I could say rewrite this based on this. Or what I would actually do is go through it with a fine-tooth comb myself and make manual edits. The backspace key is your friend. For our purposes, I'm just going to grab this and I'm going to paste it in here with that prompt that I had earlier, which was review this synopsis and come up with a detailed list of candidate world building elements I should consider adding to my story Bible for tracking purposes. Those may be settings, key events, items, etc. And we're just running through using chat as this sort of as a way to get essentially distill this synopsis that we'd mostly generated here. Now, again, I'm doing this very fast for the purposes of demo. What I would do is I would go through here and I would use this as sort of inspiration, right? The creative kindling where I'm like, oh, this is good. Let me change that. Actually, that's all wrong, but I like where it's going. And so I would take that, I would rework it, and then as a final step, I would go back into world building, click import, paste it there, and import. And what we would wind up with is it's going to throw this, don't call it alien planet. The other thing is if chat is ever being lazy and calling something alien planet and you want it to come up with names, either go back and forth with it. So that's what's nice about chat, right? It's dynamic. You can be like, come on, lazy, name the planet. Give me some options. So chat, you can use dynamically, or you can toggle the model. You can just change it to high quality. High quality works a little bit harder. That one does use credits. Chat is free and included, does not use credits by default, but if you toggle on high quality, it's a smarter model. It will use credits. So yeah, I would get rid of anything I don't want to bring in. If there were any characters, for example, and then click go and import those. I will just do it because why not? Let me take a look. I want to start to ask folks to queue up questions since we are coming up on time. If there are any questions, I want to make sure that we cover those. In the meantime, the last step of this, we have now essentially, we have all of the characters are already there. We don't have to do any character generation. We just added world building elements that we thought were important. I should say I could do the same process that we did for world building. We may need characters that are specific to this story. And so I would probably do that same workflow, right? Where I take the synopsis, which I spent a lot of time punching up and making great. Let's see, disrupt the quantum lock. I'm gonna just add in here. Holmes realizes the murderer was none other than Michael Stewart. Oh boy, that's going to get me in trouble. But if I take this and I use it to feed it, I'm going to toggle to high quality and I'm going to say, review this synopsis. And I'm going to say, and name characters that are necessary to write this story. And I'm going to feed that paste in. Okay. And in this case, here we go. Okay. Just again, alien inhabitants. And I'm going to go back and say, no, give me more specifics. Name characters, give them backgrounds, etc. And here we go. Okay. Alien planet characters. There we go. Consular Vera, Leon, Realm, antagonist, Michael Stewart. Perfect. So we got what we wanted. Now we can copy this. We can do that same process we did with world building here, where we import, paste. There we go. Here we go. And we got all of the quantum weapon AI Sable. Ooh, that's cool. It's an AI. I already have Sherlock. I don't need a new Sherlock. I don't need a new Watson, but all the rest of these, I'll bring them in. I'll click go. And here, through workshopping a little bit with chat, we got a fresh character list. We have all of our world building elements. The next and final steps to write this book in the series, the next book in the series, would be to generate the outline. And with that outline, from that outline, let's see if there we go. We got a few blanks in here, but we got our characters. That's me, cold, brilliant, and manipulative. Yay, it got me. All right, so I'm in there. And so with these characters, and also you'll notice it imported these characters and it named the characters for the book that they're in. So they're in there, and that means when it comes time for the AI to generate the outline, it knows that this is the outline for the quantum fog event. So if I toggle back, I can preview where we left off in the sign of the four. I can see, okay, the strange story of Jonathan Small, that's where we left off. But for now, we're in the quantum fog event. I want this generated in third person limited, past tense. I'm going to generate. This step takes the longest because the AI is reading the most, it is synthesizing the most. So this actually might not finish before we wrap up. But the idea is we're getting this outline in place so that we can then do that process I showed you earlier. We click create chapter and we have a linked chapter in the left. And then we can use the draft tool if we want to generate scenes and actual chapter prose. Again, like I said, you don't have to use this in a sort of generative way. If instead you want to use series folders primarily for organizational purposes, for managing these characters that appear in multiple books, so you have quick reference, so you have a chat that knows how you've described characters, you have a chat that knows which books certain characters appear in. When we were building the series functionality just about a year ago, that was one of the big pain points. Folks were like, I have so many books in this series and I don't know when certain key events happened and I don't know when so and so met so and so or which books they were even in. And that sort of like intelligence is part of what this folder exists to solve. As long as you have projects inside of this folder, that you're providing some degree of visibility between these projects. And we'll see if this wraps up. So let's see. I'm gonna just double check. Yes, Brian.
Yes. What do you recommend about, so if you generate a chapter from the outline, they have on the down in the outline at the three dot button, they have update chapter. Are you supposed to update that immediately after?
That is a great question. And because this finished, actually, maybe I can showcase this real quick. So update, just to clarify, I'm going to create chapter one from this outline that was created for this book. Again, I'm doing this very quickly for demo purposes. I would go in and massage that generated chapter summary. I might have an idea for where I want chapter one to end. I would want chapter one to end with the discovery of the device, maybe, because I think that sets things in motion. Here, we got a document called chapter one. It is linked to the correct document. It is the first chapter, so it's not continuing from another. This is something called chapter continuity that you can establish optionally to give AI visibility into what happened before. We're not going to do that for our purposes. Instead, I'm going to pop open the draft tool and I'm going to, the next steps, I would be generating scenes and I would be generating prose. So if I click generate scenes, Sudowrite is going to read this chapter summary, which again, I would punch up personally. It will read this chapter summary and it will say, okay, let's see. I see there's probably an investigation scene here. There is probably a quiet conversation after these events, etc. And so it would set up scenes for us so that the next step where we're actually generating the full chapter, which may be 3,000, 4,000 words in one go, we have the scenes in place, the bones of that in place. Part of the reason we're doing this like staged generation is you would get poor results if you went from this sort of chapter summary to like a full, okay, write 4,000 words about this. It'd be meandering. The AI, it can't really do a great job with that yet. Instead, there's more opportunities for you as the author to interject and course correct and make sure it tracks with your vision. And this is a final opportunity for you to say, whoops, let me zoom out. For you to say first person, no, I think this should be third person. I think it should be, yeah, third person past tense. You set that. And also, I should say, if you update it here, it is reflected in your outline as well. So if you change it in the draft tool, it changes it here. If you do have alternating POVs or something, that's something you can set as a setting you can toggle over. Now, your question about update. If I were to get inspired and manually write chapter 1, or maybe generate a little bit and then mostly write it myself, and say it went in a direction that didn't track with what the outline ultimately says. Maybe this chapter summary is stale because I set up a bunch of stuff that I wasn't planning on. I would click into the 3 dots and I would do update. And what that's doing is it's telling the AI, hey, reread what we actually wrote and update this chapter summary and the outline just to be reflective of where the prose landed over there. So I should say, you never have to do this. This is just a quick way for you to update the chapter summary if you want to keep that outline up to date.
It will be referring to that when it writes chapter 2. It will be referring back to that summary in chapter 1. Is that the purpose you'd want to update it?
It will, if you're working in chapter 2, it will primarily refer to the chapter 2 outline summary. And if let's just do this. If I were to create chapter 2, folks, I am going to run a few minutes over just since we got a few minutes late start. Here at chapter 2, draft, I'm sorry, not draft. I'm going to the linking menu. You can see chapter 2 continues from the end of chapter 1. And so the AI is actually going to have the big picture context of the actual events of chapter 1, and it's not going to really refer to that summary. That summary is primarily for, I think the chat will look at it occasionally, and then the draft tool, while it is generating scenes, is looking at it. So it is not the chapter summary, how important it is primarily important as you prepare and write that chapter, but you may want to keep it up to date for the sake of future books, right? Because as we saw in the outline, I can toggle and I can view those outlines from prior books. And so it's helpful if those are somewhat up to date. Okay, let's say a 20-book series with character growth. I would like to request a tie to a specific book, just like outline for, yes. So Keith, what you're describing is something that is on our radar as a feature request, a sort of like timeline, character timeline, for example, where, okay, Sherlock, I can indicate which books he's in, or yeah, a way to designate which book someone is in, a selector for which version of that character. I think that is on our roadmap, but TBD, I think it has not been a top priority, in part because people have come up with so many alternative ways to manage this. So between hiding, between deleting, another strategy I did not show is that some folks have come up with conventions where they just name the character something like that. Let me just make this version A, right? You can say Watson talks to version A, and what happens is we wind up with Sudowrite is doing something just called story Bible detection. It underlines things that it sees in the story Bible. Toggle traits for specific chapters and books. Also a great feature request. As of right now, there's no way to say, ooh, only expose these traits for certain books. That would probably be in scope for something like a timeline feature. That's just not there yet. So there is a degree of manual management. And like I said, I think there is the assumption in a lot of this that you'll primarily be working sequentially, where you'd be working on one book at a time. And so it is less disruptive to the flow. We are at time, folks. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. This was fun. I got to experiment a little bit with using chat now that it is there as a part of this flow. And hey, that makes everything much faster and funner. So I hope that everybody is taking something away from this. Also, if you are newer, just a reminder, we do weekly welcome sessions every Tuesday. We do office hours every Friday, and we have a whole slate of incredible free daily live classes. You can find that calendar under the question mark in the upper right. Thanks for joining me, folks, and I hope I catch you another one of these real soon. Take care.